I want to make sure that you guys understand how to do this. On the graph, your primary is here. And your secondary is across the top. So you were assigned a primary that, for me, is ringleader. First power, and then passion. Right? So then you would go over here and you go, okay, so passion as on this list as a primary, and the power along the top gives me the people's champion. So you want to do yours and then flip it. Right. Okay? Right? So that's your twin, because when you're operating from your primary and your secondary, in any given situation, what's operating right now could be different. It's not going to be very different. Like, I'm never going to have Chuck's profile. But it could be that I'm more passionate right now, and later I'll be more powerful. So those are your twins, and you want to understand both of those profiles. Okay? So it's all about how they see you. And then when I shared these with, those of you who don't know that Colleen is my sister. And when I told her what mine were, she's like, of course, you were always that. Right? So that's how the world sees you, even though I may not have seen myself in that fashion. Now, why does it matter? Because you cannot hide energy. We talk about the six senses and our sixth sense. And the sixth sense is a way of talking about how you process information, your intuition. Well, in Speaking the Lost Language of God, which is written by a scientist, he says that there are over 64 senses that you process information through that they have named, and they believe there are more. So you're processing communication all the time, and people are processing your communication all the time. And we know that 93% of communication is nonverbal. You've heard of your body language, you've heard of your tone of voice, and 7% the words. So when you stop and think about that, we're always communicating. We're communicating our confidence, we're communicating our lack of confidence. We're communicating our interest or our lack of interest. Always communicating. And sometimes we think, well, they don't know, I didn't say anything about it, I'm not talking about it. They know. Which is why if you're in sales, and of course we all are on some level because the sell is human, but if you're in sales, those of you who are in sales, can you sell when you're off? Hell no. There's just no way. You might as well reschedule the appointment, because you will not be able to make that sale when you're off. That's why it's so important for those of us who are owners and managers of team members that sell, that we make sure that they are up, because they're up equals sales, right? Right, so you cannot hide energy. So when you are, let me give you an example. Like when you are excited about an idea and your eyes light up and your face lights up and you get like gestures, it communicates something. The same thing can happen on the other side when you're not. And what is marketing? Communication and education. So I always say, if you're not getting the results you're after in your business, what are you communicating or failing to communicate, consciously or unconsciously? Because most of our communication is unconscious. We spend a lot of time on the words, but we don't spend a lot of time on the body language and the tone of voice and the other ways that people process what we're communicating to them. We're not mindful of that. Right? Meanwhile, all the time we invest in those 7% is important. I'm not going to diminish it, but it's not nearly as important as what you're communicating in the 93%. Oftentimes, we underestimate the power or we forget the power of a first impression. But the first impression, those first 6 to 9 seconds that somebody has with you, forms their entire perception of you and your work. So managing those first couple of seconds there, whether it's the first couple of seconds at your website, the first couple of seconds with your brochure, the first couple of seconds with you on the phone, the first couple of seconds in that meeting, and you're always having to recreate it, which thank God you had the opportunity to do, right? But your first impression, their first impression of you. If you have a message that's important, you have a responsibility to deliver that message. In a research study that Forbes magazine did, they said 85% of your financial success is due to skills in human engineering. Your personality, your ability to communicate, to negotiate, and to lead. 85%. Only 15% of whatever you will generate in your business has to do with your technical ability. And what do we focus on most of the time? Our technical ability. It's not that. So we've been talking about the why. We've been talking about the huge impact of small things. We've been talking about connecting with people. We've been talking about being vulnerable. Ever since we met Paul Dunn back in August and brought him here twice, actually, for you all. And the enormous power of who you are and why you do what you do. And all of that is personality based, because as Jovan and Katie have recently learned, they have a new competitor. Well, guess what? You're always going to have new competitors. If you do a good job in your business, people are going to compete with you. They're going to try to find a way to do it better, faster, or cheaper. That's capitalism. So what will differentiate you isn't necessarily what you might think it would be, because if you can fascinate 4 times more money, and at the highest levels, people don't get paid for what they do, they get paid for who they are in the marketplace, who they're known by. So that's why we're taking the time today to actually really look at this. So I also want to talk with you about what are the blocks to your ability to fascinate. The first one is distraction. So I don't need to tell you guys how everyone is distracted by their cell phones, by traffic, it's ridiculous. I used to get 100 emails a day in my inbox. I get 200 emails a day in my inbox. Can't even read. I would have to spend my entire day reading my inbox and do nothing else. It's ridiculous. So distraction is a very, very important thing for you to understand about your customers, because when people are fascinated, they're focused and relaxed, and they can hear your message. If they're distracted or you're unclear, then what happens is they begin to be confused and to doubt what you're saying, even if what you're saying is very valid. So your ability to cut in and get them engaged and focused on what it is that you have to say quickly, you keep that distraction from happening. Part of what this looks like is we go in and we introduce ourselves. Hello, I'm an action coach and I'm a coach. So what? When I first started this business 10 years ago, I said I'm a business coach. People go, what's that? Well, they were intrigued. What is that? So I could tell them. Today, if I go to a networker and they ask me what I do and I say I'm a business coach, immediately they're like, oh my God, everyone is a coach. I've met 30 of them already this week. Right? So that is when it's become competition and commoditized, right? So I have to go in and actually very quickly establish why is Jody, an action coach in our firm, different than somebody else. So part of this is, how do you begin to differentiate yourself based on your natural ability to fascinate? All right, so you want to remove confusion and doubt by actually engaging people quickly. Now, I'm talking to you guys like talking with you face to face, but it's also in every other way that you communicate in your business. So think about your website, your videos, all these different ways that you communicate, the way you're off, everything. All right. So we talk a little bit about distraction. The next one is your competition. I love this saying from Sally's book, different is better than better. They want to know, why are you different? Sometimes you can't see this for yourself, even though this work will help us. So you might want to go in and when we go to work, talk with one another about, why are you different, especially if you know each other. I want you to think for a minute, like I was just saying, how you introduce yourself when you introduce yourself and your business to somebody. How do you typically introduce yourself? I can tell you one thing that I learned years ago was, it's very different for me when I say I'm a business coach than when I say I'm the owner of a business coaching firm. Very different posture, very different way of being, very different feeling, very different message, right? So how do you introduce yourself when you introduce yourself in your business? And so this is a big block to fascination. And while sometimes competition can motivate people, to do their best, it can also lead to spending more time, more money, and more energy to try to win. We've been taught to compete. However, as I said, better isn't always better. Sometimes it's worse. When you successfully differentiate yourself, you have less competition to deal with. Right? And then the last one is the commoditization. So if distraction is a jealous seductress pulling you away, right? And competition is a public executioner, then commoditization is the silent assassin, because it's operating in the background. You almost don't know that it's happening until it's already there. So I've had this conversation this week with Katie and Jovan, where I went to an economist a couple of years ago, and I asked them, how do I gain margin with our clients in mature industries? So you guys might want to write this down. He said, Jody, there are only 4 ways. In a mature industry, your margins are always eroding. So is it okay if I use you guys as an example? Okay, good. All right, good. All right, so Katie and Jovan are in the event industry, right? This is a mature industry that's been around a long time, right? So they're in a mature industry. Now they've been doing extraordinarily well in their business, and now all of a sudden we got this competition. I mean, they've had massive growth, and now this guy has come in and is competing with them. So the economist said there are only 4 ways. The first one is you need a new distribution channel. So in the example of Unearthed Vintage, that's Sandra. She's going to go out, and she's actually going to go meet more people, so she expands our ability to impact and reach others. Right? And then what she's going to do is she's going to bring in other additional planners and destination management companies that will do business with them, because Katie realized early on in business the bride is not her client. The planner is her client. Right? So new distribution channel. The second one is a new geography. So a new place, a new location, a new area that you're going to do your business in that hasn't been exposed to your business. Right? The third is the introduction of a new service or product that you were not offering yet. So you heard them talk about their new product offerings. And the last one is an innovation of some kind in your business model. So I had a conversation with our banker, who's also our friend, and she was telling me about this attorney who wants to have a flat fee for corporate transactional work for clients. And she asked me what I thought about that model. Well, a lot of business owners want to know what their legal expenses are going to be. They don't want to bring in an attorney and have no freaking idea what that's going to cost them. So if they know I'm going to invest $6,000 over the course of this year and I'm going to get X, Y, Z, and I'll have those things taken care of, they're much more likely to do something like that, particularly if they're small and the stakes are not as high as like massive litigation or something like that, right? So that would be an innovation in a business model, a pricing innovation, for instance, right? So the 4 of them are a new distribution channel, a new geography, a new product or service offering, or an innovation to your business model, right? So those are the ways that you can combat, if you will, commoditization. Now, the other thing that the economist said to me is whatever you do is only going to last about 18 months to 2 years, because then they're going to catch on and they're going to go do that thing. So you've got to be looking today at how you're going to innovate or be ahead 18 months to 2 years from now. So I started that conversation with Jovan the other day. I'm like, this is a great short-term strategy, what we're doing. Sandra's more of a long-term strategy. And what else are we going to be looking at over the next 6 months to a year to be ahead of that 2 years out from now, if we have that long, because things are speeding up quite a bit, right? All right, so coming back to Sally Hogshead's work, is that when you are competing and you become commoditized, which in any mature industry is going to happen, it will shave off your points of difference. It brings on complacency. It saps your defining qualities and eventually transforms you and your vibrant, one-of-a-kind edge into a generic replica. And then you're vulnerable and easily replaced. So if we go with this work and we look at what makes us different, we're going to have a competitive advantage that may shrink the number of people. You no longer have the masses, but you have the ones that resonate with you and are looking for what you can uniquely provide them. And then coupling that with your why. So greatness can only win by being noticed and remembered. Right? So it doesn't matter how great you are, if your client base or your prospect base is distracted, if you're competing to win and you're not differentiating yourself in some way, shape, or form, or you've been commoditized and you haven't differentiated yourself in some way, shape, or form. You are perfect for certain things and wrong for others. And you can't, nor should you, be perfect for everything. When we get into that place where we're trying to do that, she calls it quicksand. So you can know you're in quicksand because you're not energized. Whereas if you're working to your natural talents and strengths, you're in your flow from wealth dynamics, you're actually operating from your archetype and how you typically fascinate, you're energized. That's how you know. So what I want you to do is to identify the ways in which you are different and then insanely over-deliver on those specific areas instead of trying to be everything to everyone. How are you different? And then insanely over-deliver on that, like insanely. And one of the things that these guys did that was pretty impressive to me, because they're young business owners with a young business, first-time business, right? Was they created their culture statement and they fired someone for violating it at the expense of having to work himself until that role was replaced. And we don't know how long that's going to be. That's different. And it's not just the clients. It's who comes onto his team. And that's pretty astounding.